Welcome to the Be Amazing podcast. On this show, we'll give you the fuel you need through motivational pep talks, the fitness tips to be your healthiest self, fortitude to push through the hardships, and focus you need to build the skills needed for the next level, no matter what that looks like to you. I'm your host, Cel Smart. I'm a wife, a mom, community leader, and fitness professional of over 18 years. I'm here to be your biggest cheerleader, advocate, and connector. Let's be amazing together. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Be Amazing podcast. I'm sitting on the couch today with my friend and producer now, brand new producer for the Be Amazing podcast. Her name is Kristen Stegall. She is the CEO of Novice Studios, Charlotte. I am so excited to do this with you and to learn more about you.
Yes.
So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So I really want to just kind of jump into a little bit of your story. Mm-hmm. Before we really dive too much into that, first, we need to lay some foundation. So tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay, so I am a young professional. I'm about to be 30, flirty, and thriving in February. And my original passion was actually interior design. So I grew up watching HGTV, Trading Spaces, and all the shows. And I was like, that's what I want my career to be. And then I started college and I was like, if I have to learn all the different types of carpet, I'm going to lose my mind. And I realized that what I actually liked was the storytelling of those TV shows and how they showed this transformation happening and how they showed people and their relationships and friendships. And I was like, okay, I think actually video production is where I'm meant to be. But my college didn't have that. So I had to get all this like hands-on training through internships and networking and things like that. And so I went to grad school and I learned all of the technical aspects of audio production, video production, web design, web development, graphic design, all the things. And so when I graduated, I was kind of a jack of all trades and wanted to do video, but was doing a little bit of everything. Then in 2020, I started my business and started out doing both YouTube production and podcast production. And then over the next year, really narrowed it on podcast production, but specifically video podcasts. So I was able to combine the two things, but be a little bit more focused than just like, we'll help you create whatever. So that is my business origin story in a nutshell.
Well, I love that because I knew that you had there had to be some level of creativity when I first met you. And you're also very like, you have such a spark about you. So like you could sell anything. So I can totally see you doing like interior design, like it totally makes sense. And it's funny to me because you even said today you were a little bit nervous about being on camera because you're usually behind the camera.
Yes.
So how does it feel right now to be sitting right here and you're the guest, you're the person that I'm interviewing. So what is that like for you?
As I was driving up for this interview, I was like, I definitely don't give my clients enough credit for how brave it is to get in front of a camera and get on the microphone and share your expertise and be ready to answer questions and just share who you are and be authentic about it. I meet people who are absolutely incredible and vibrant, but then they clamp up and, when they're in front of the camera and then you're like, oh, come on, let's bring that magic out. Like, where are you hiding? And so it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but it also feels very comfortable because like I know you and we vibe well together. So I think that is something to keep in mind too, as you're producing a podcast, as you bring in guests and things like that. Choose people that you really vibe with, that you feel like see you and understand you and are going to bring those strengths out in you, because that's how I feel right now.
Yes, all of that, because vibe is everything. And I think that goes into, especially when you're doing a podcast or a video and when you're doing interviews, because if the other person is nervous, it's my job to make you feel comfortable.
Yes.
And to be engaging and to bring you in and like, let's create like this amazing conversation. Yes. Do you have anything that you do with clients that you feel like are super uptight or maybe very good, in the business format, but you get them in front of a camera and all of a sudden it's like, blank stare and there's like, how do you go about like pulling that out of somebody?
So the first thing that I'll do if it's like, okay, it's like pulling teeth and everybody's like on edge is we'll stop the recording and we'll take a break and I'll be like, okay, what is your hype song? Like, who's the artist that gets you really hyped up? What is the song that when you hear it, you can't help but dance and like you are feeling yourself and all the things? And we'll just literally have like a 30-second dance party really quick to like get the wiggles out and get comfortable and be silly, because once you can do that and dance in front of your podcast producer, then you can certainly talk about why you're the best at what you do. And then also, you know, if they're in front of the camera and they have this outline, but they're kind of struggling to get through it, is I will prompt them with questions. So I'll ask, you know, what was a client that, you know, made an impact for you, or where did you, kind of like mini case study questions for them that can prompt them to be like, oh, right, and help them just recall things. Because it can also be kind of nerve-wracking if you spent too much time. You can over prepare and feel like you have had to memorize something, and then you get in front of the camera and you're like, oh, I forgot what I was supposed to say. So if I can prompt them with questions to help it feel more natural for them to give those responses, then I'll do that.
That's so important. And I have to back up for a second. She said dance party. Like, that is so my jam. And I love it. Like, I make my son, like, every time we go out and we're doing something, I always make him dance. And it takes him a minute to warm up, but once he gets into it, we get grooving. Yeah. But I think that's a great way to break the ice. That's a great way to just get people to loosen up. Yeah. And then the questions. So that to me is really important. I always like to make sure that my guests are prepped before they come, just to give them, like, here's where I'm going. Yes. Like, here's the plan. Here's the action plan. Now, we can totally derail, but at least we have some kind of like outline. Is that something that you really encourage as well?
Yes. I know some producers will say not to send your guests the questions so that it can feel very natural and off the cuff. Because again, you can over prepare as a podcast guest. But I think that even if you say, okay, just take 15 minutes to read these questions and just jot down a few initial thoughts, or give them a little bit of context. So as I was going into this conversation and reading through the questions that Cel sent me, I was like, okay, 3 podcast tips. I need to think about Cel's audience. Like, Cel's audience maybe hasn't started a podcast yet, or they're from all different backgrounds. Like, maybe some of them are business owners, some of them are corporate folks. So I really need to take that into account as I'm planning out these responses. If I showed up off the cuff, I'd probably be like, I mean, if you already have a podcast, then you do this and la, la, la. So I think that if you give your guests a little bit of parameters to say, okay, just take 10 minutes, read through these questions, send me your initial thoughts, or jot down, 1 or 2 things under each question. That way they at least feel a little bit more comfortable. So even if the questions change during the interview, or they think of something else during the interview, they at least have an idea of what to expect going into it.
Okay. Again, these are so important. She's going to give us 3 tips here in a little bit about starting a podcast. But I want to talk about something that you've helped me with. So we have 107 episodes right now for the Be Amazing podcast, which is huge. And it's I did it all on my own at first. And thanks to SweatNet for being the ones to like have it on their platform and allow me to share through that platform. But I knew that it was time to go next level. And that's where I brought you in. Because again, I'm doing this all myself, which is a great place to start. Yes. But if you stay there, you're not going to grow. And I am in a place where I'm so ready for next level. And to do that, you have to collaborate and partner and hire people that are going to elevate you and push you to that next level. And that's what you're doing. So the one thing I found really important, and my husband Eric was on the same page, because as soon as he saw it, he's like, "Oh my gosh!" She renamed all my episodes. Like, she went in and like was very specific about each episode, and like just the words you used like caught my attention. And I've done these interviews, so I already knew who I was talking to, but the way that you like what you said and that was so important, or what you said about each episode was so important. So talk a little bit about that, and like, how did you come up with these quick, catchy lines? Like, they're catchy. So, like, tell me about that.
That's a great question. And that is one of the 3 tips that I was wanting to share with your listeners today, because what you name an episode is so important. And I've learned over these past few years of having my business, that's kind of my superpower, is coming up with those episode titles. And what you name your podcast as well is really important too. But when it comes to titles, when I was looking through Cel's podcast, I was like, okay, some of these guests I know, and I'm like, I know that they're amazing, but some of these guests, I don't recognize their names. So if I'm just scrolling through, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to listen to this episode or not. But again, thinking about Cel's audience, and if you have a podcast or want to have a podcast, who's going to be listening to this and what's going to call to them? So your audience is obviously high achievers. Some are business owners. Some are just leaders in their careers. And I shouldn't say just leaders. They are exceptional leaders. They want to get better. They want to grow. They care about their health. They care about fitness. They want tactical tips. So I'm going to go through and name those episodes in ways that are going to pull out what some of those key takeaways are and those keywords that they might be searching for. So that if somebody's brand new to the podcast and they're like, okay, be amazing. Like, what's this about? And then they scroll through and then see these titles that show the transformations that people have gone through. That's a great thing to include in a title. Some pain points that I know that they're going to address in the episode. And I'm like, okay, I need this one right now. It gives people that starting place, and then once they're hooked in your content, then it's like, okay, I don't even care what the title is anymore. I'm just going to listen to everything. But we want to make sure that we meet them where they're at, especially when it comes to search, because podcast platforms are still catching up to platforms like Google and YouTube, where they're taking into account, the transcript of your video and what people are actually saying in it, because they have the tools to be able to do that. With a podcast, if those words that people are searching for are not in your titles, it's not going to be found.
Okay, so this is super important. So let's just continue this conversation with the 3 tips. We know that that's one of them. Mm-hmm. What are the other 2?
So the second tip is that you need to have video for your podcast. In the year 2024, we're only seeing video podcasts become more and more popular, but also it gives you the opportunity to create a ton of additional content from your podcast. So if you are a busy business owner and you don't want to sit down and record for 10,000 hours to get enough reels for 1 month, you can instead record a handful of podcast episodes, release them over the course of the month on a weekly basis, and then cut those podcast episodes into smaller clips. And you can make them vertical format for Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok. But then you can also use the horizontal clips, let's say 2 to 5 minutes long, of just small sound bites from the full-length episode, and release those as standalone YouTube videos. So then you're also growing that content platform. And again, going back to those titles, you can experiment with different ways of titling the same content by repurposing those clips on YouTube. So no matter how people are searching for it, hopefully they'll land on at least one of those clips and then find your channel.
This is awesome. Okay, so what's our last tip?
If you're using Zoom, which a lot of people are, especially if you're interviewing people who are in a different part of the world, different part of the country, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people see when they're using Zoom to record podcast episodes is talking over each other. When it comes to Zoom, anything that's recorded over an internet connection, it is going to amplify whoever is the loudest and mute whoever is the quietest. So even if you're like, yes, I love what you're saying, yes, yes, it's muting your guest and amplifying your voice. So you're going to have these awkward blips where all of a sudden the listener can't hear what the guest is saying, and your voice is coming through super loud. And if you have it in speaker view for the video, it's going to be jumping back to you instead of staying on your guest as they're making their point. So you can nod as enthusiastically as you would like to, because that's not going to impact the sound, and it's still going to, let your guests know that you're hearing them and you're enjoying what they're saying, but try to avoid the instinct to be like, yes, okay, yeah, don't do that.
Okay, I'm so guilty. I cannot tell you how many Zoom calls that I've had with guests and go back and listen to the audio, and I was like, no, like right over a really important point. So I totally, all 3 of these points are really important, and I really appreciate you talking about it. And you talked about naming the episodes. You talked about the importance of video. So YouTube is huge. I want to talk a minute about that.
Yeah.
And then also just what you said about using Zoom, like just being very conscious when you're on a call, because I am one to get excited and I'm extremely animated, hands and all, and having to learn, like if it's on Zoom, just zip it. So, but let's talk now a little bit more about YouTube, because I feel like this is like your jam and your zone, because you are going to help me launch this on YouTube. So stay tuned.
Yeah. So the best thing about YouTube is that it's actually becoming the top podcast platform where people are finding their shows. So if there's a video version of your podcast available, people are actually preferring to watch it on YouTube. And if they subscribe to YouTube Premium, which is their paid, monthly service, they can actually turn the video off and still listen to it like it's a podcast. So it's helping to kind of double and repurpose that platform. They're also experimenting with ways of differentiating between a podcast podcast video and a regular video, which is cool because it's always interesting to see how different platforms are adapting with the times and keeping up with what's popular. So it'll be interesting to see even that how that supports creators over the next year or so. But again, it's a great way to repurpose your podcast content. So you'll have the full length episode on YouTube, but then also cut some longer clips, and by longer I mean like 2 to 5 minutes long, and release those on YouTube as well. What we've seen is that with our clients, we've had people find them through those smaller clips and through YouTube Shorts, and then go to their channel, subscribe, and then they're subscribe to the podcast. So they're growing their audience. If you're on your hosting platform, it's not, your YouTube views are not going to count towards your overall downloads. But when you're putting together a media kit for sponsors or just tallying, how many eyes are on your content, you just add those numbers together. And we've seen clients, double their downloads by being present on YouTube and in audio only platforms.
Okay. And you hit on a really important subject, sponsorship, monetization.
Mm-hmm.
These are things I've thought about. Mm-hmm. So what number of downloads or what do you have to be at for someone to get the attention of people that want to sponsor or place an ad or actually create revenue?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that it's so different depending on the types of businesses that you're wanting to partner with for sponsorships. If you have an audience that is very, very niche, whether that's niche industry, niche topic, niche location. So if you're a Charlotte-based podcast and 90% of your listeners are in Charlotte, you have the opportunity that even with a smaller number of downloads, let's say like 1 to 300 downloads an episode, 100 to 300 to be clear. Not one single download. Nobody will sponsor you with one single download. Then you have the opportunity to say, okay, it's 300 people, but all of those people are in Charlotte. So if you're a restaurant, if you're a local spa, if you're a local service provider, that is very, very specific to the exact people that you're wanting to speak to directly. So you can get away with having fewer downloads if you have a very niche industry or location. If you're wanting to branch out to, the HelloFresh, all the big podcasts are sponsored by HelloFresh, right? Then you're looking at, at least 1,000 downloads an episode within the first 7 days of it coming out. Upwards of 10,000 downloads a month, which is massive, massive, massive. So I think reaching out to those smaller businesses and having partnerships with them is a great way to go, especially even just for relationship building and having those connections for other things. But again, you're serving them by saying, okay, we're talking to 300 people, but imagine if 300 people went to your restaurant in, this random morning on a Saturday. That is huge for a small business. So I think get creative about the kinds of companies that you reach out to. And then also when it comes to local service providers, there's a lot of course creators and things like that where you can leverage affiliates. So this quarter, I'm going to become an affiliate for somebody that is launching a Facebook ad course for podcasters. So that speaks directly to my audience and makes sense. And then I get a commission for the sales of people that purchase that course because they heard about it from me. And so that's another great thing too. Instead of doing, this many audio snippets in an episode over the course of a month or whatever, you just talk about that affiliate as often as you want to, and then you get those commissions, over time. So it might not be as much money up front, but it gives you the opportunity to prove your ROI because that person can say, hey, this is how much money you've generated for us, or this is how many people have bought the course because of you. And then you can calculate that against how many downloads you're getting on an episode. And then that is another asset that you have as a part of your media kit as well.
So much. There's so much good content just in this alone. You are smart and savvy. You're young. You're a businesswoman. I knew we connected right off the bat, and it was you want to align yourself with people that, like you said before, get you, mm-hmm. and you want to build and establish those relationships, not only just from having her in my circle or I'm aligned with is only going to cause me to go up because you're going to help me elevate. And the other part is we create collaborations, create opportunities. And I just am such a big believer in that. And so I'm so thankful for the opportunity to have met you because you came up to me. This is the other thing. When you go to events, go up to people and introduce yourself. Don't sit back, especially when it's something that may jam with you. So mm-hmm. She came up to me because she heard me talk about the Be Amazing podcast, and she walked right up to me, introduced herself. And it was this immediate oh, like, I need to know her. Like, there's something about her. I need to work with her. So that's one thing I would encourage you to do too, is like, don't hesitate. Don't hold back. Just go. Like when you go to a networking event, that is what it's for. When you go to a women's event, that is what it's for. Make yourself known. Don't wait for people to come to you. You go to them. And this is proof of that. So excited to be partnering with you, working with you, and like, can't wait to see Be Amazing podcast on YouTube. So big stuff coming. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit personal, because I think it's really important to know you as a person. You're a mom.
Yes.
How old is your little one?
My son is 14 months old now.
Wow.
Actually, he'll be 15 months next week.
Girl,
he's
you're
growing up really
chasing
fast.
him.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, and because you're a creative, do you have any other outlets that you lean into for like hobbies, or do you have something else that's not in the creative? Yeah. Because that's your job.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I do still have a love of interior design. And so one of my big goals for 2024 is to like explode all of that creativity into our home, which scares the living crap out of my husband. He's like, what are you talking about buying power tools? Like, what's happening? And so I bought a hutch off of Facebook Marketplace, and I've been refinishing that over the last few months, which has been really fun. I learned how to use an orbital sander and, picking out like, okay, what's this hardware, and restoring the antique brass that it came with and all this stuff. I'm like, look at me go. And it's so relaxing because I'm not having to think about technical whatever. It's kind of, I can turn part of my brain off and just think creatively and just use my hands. And it's so much fun. So that is, one of the projects that I'm working on right now. We're, going to redo our living room, dining room, our master bedroom, our guest bedroom, like all the things. My husband is terrified to just say a prayer for him, but it's really exciting, and watching creators that are doing that DIY content on YouTube is one of my hobbies too. And then I love to read fiction novels. I'm a big romantasy reader. I love anything with like fairies and dragons.
That's why. Well, not the fairy part, not the dragons, but the fairy part. Yes, I get that.
Yes. And so that has been also my hobby. Anything written by Sarah J. Maas I'm into right now. So
awesome. I love this. So this is the best part of doing interviews, is like getting to know people just past what they're known for. So we've talked a little bit about too your fitness journey, and that you have some things for yourself that you're setting into place for this year, goals this year. So tell us a little bit about the fitness side of things.
Yeah. So that is like we need to have a glass of wine and like hash it out. I'm definitely, a child of the early 2000s diet culture and reading crazy things in magazines about actresses like eating their kids' leftovers and that's it, so that they can lose weight, after a baby, and all that stuff that I'm like filtering through in my mind. But I have a big goal of losing 50 pounds this year, which is huge. And my biggest motivation is keeping up with my feral toddler. And he's like so active and wants to climb on everything. And I want to be able to keep up with him and do the monkey bars with him when he's big enough to do that and things like that. And so I've just been watching my nutrition. Last year was like my first full year postpartum. And some of the biggest things I had to address were my mental health, dealing with postpartum anxiety and depression, and starting medication to help with that, and then dealing with pelvic floor pain that I had as a result of my like sudden urgent C-section that I had to have my son. And once I was pain-free, I was like, I didn't realize how much of an obstacle that was for me to like start making the leap into healthier habits. And I used to be a huge runner. I've run 2 half marathons, and that's something I would love to get back to, but I can definitely tell like with the extra weight, how that impacts my knee, and it'll bring the pelvic floor pain back if I push it too hard. So it's really taking it slow. I feel like so much of postpartum has been just forcing myself to slow down and like address the most important things first. Cause I think as high achievers, we're like, I want results now. Like I want to be like 50 pounds lighter tomorrow, please. But all the like extreme diets and things that we've been conditioned to do are really harmful. And I think for me, it's like, what are the tiny habits that are going to help me get there? It might happen this year. It might happen next year. but every single day I can do something to help make progress in that direction. And that's going to help me actually keep the weight off in the long term. So that is like one of my biggest focuses.
And I love this so much because this is definitely in my wheelhouse when we started talking about fitness and you started sharing about your journey. And I was just like, that's amazing because so many people that are, or I would say even just women in general who are big, high achievers, a lot of times put themselves last. And when she told me that this was like her goal and mental health playing such a big role in that, when you change the way you look at it, and when it's not about like trying to get to a certain size, or it's not about like, what am I going to look like on camera? When you let go of all of that and you realize it's more about, I just want to feel good. I just want to be able to play with my kid. I just want to be able to show up to work and do and be my best self. Like those are the things that matter. So I'm excited for you and to be a cheerleader on the sidelines going, let's do this. And like, we even talked about running together. I was like, let's do a 5K.
I know.
So I'm like, I love 5Ks. We got to do that. We got a whole group. So if you want to join us,
yes,
feel free.
Please.
But I really think that was the important part because I really think that business women always put themselves last. So I think this is a really important topic, and I so appreciate you being so open and vulnerable and sharing your own personal journey.
Yeah.
And I want to lead into like, so what keeps you inspired and motivated?
Definitely my family. I think that everything I do, I try to think about like, okay, my son is watching me do this thing. Like, is this a good habit or a bad habit? And, you know, what kind of person do I want to raise him to be? And also, like, what just makes me happy for the sake of making me happy? I think that a lot of people lose themselves in postpartum. Like, all of a sudden, your identity is tied up in just being a mom and, like, doing everything for your kids. But you do have to take that time for yourself. And so for me, like, going into the garage with my N95 mask and my orbital sanders, like, my decompression time and my time to have something that's just mine. And so I think that, you know, definitely things that are restful has been a big priority for me. Trying to structure my business and my habits in a way that's going to support me mentally and physically. And just thinking about like, okay, not what are just the benefits today? Like, how am I feeling today because of these things? But how am I going to feel in a year, 5 years from now? And what's the vision that I have for myself? And does this bring me closer to that? Or does it, you know, take me one step back from that? And I try to use that to make my decisions now on a daily basis.
I love that so much. Do you have a song? Like, this is what I want to know. I want to know what song? Do you have a song that like speaks to you?
Oh my gosh, that's such a okay. Definitely. So I love Fleetwood Mac and Florence and the Machine. Those are like my two power women. And Taylor Swift. I can't believe I did not immediately think of Taylor Swift
was gonna come up. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the entire Reputation album just start to finish. If you're like in a mood and you're like, I can't do this anymore, just the whole Reputation album start to finish is so good, especially Ready For It by Taylor Swift. Such a good hype song. I love Shake It Off. I think it's just like a classic song by her, and just like the entire discography of Taylor Swift. I could go on and on about that. But Cosmic Love by Florence and the Machine is a great hype song, or Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine. Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, even though it's slow, it kind of gets me hyped up. I don't know. There's something about it. There's something about Stevie Nicks. I tell my husband, if our next baby is a girl, then I want to name her Stevie. I'm like, I'm obsessed with her. Cool. So yeah, I think those are my main hype songs right now, and it changes all the time. Last year it was Starry-Eyed Surprise by Paul Oakenfold or something like that, from like late 90s, early 2000s. I
was gonna say, like, some of these songs, like some of these artists are not like today. Right. So that's like, that's awesome. Taylor is, but that's awesome.
Yes.
Well, I so appreciate you today taking the time to like have this conversation. And the last thing I want to ask you is there anything else on your heart that you want to share with the audience?
Yes. And I think this is a great example of setting your guest questions ahead of time, because at first I was like, I don't know, maybe there's nothing. And then, something came to me later last night after I was thinking about it. And I don't know if you follow Moo-Moos and Macaroons on Instagram. She's currently going through a breast cancer journey, and has been sharing like very transparently how it's impacted her mentally and things like that. My mom is a breast cancer survivor. It's something that I think about a lot. So this is just your friendly reminder to do your self-exams at home, get your mammogram done every year. If somebody close to you is a breast cancer survivor, just remember that you should start looking at mammograms and preventative things, about 10 years before the age they were when they were diagnosed, if they were diagnosed before the age of 50. So my mom was diagnosed at 49, but I want to be vigilant about that now. And, there are a lot of risks. I know there's a lot of conversations about different processed foods and the impact that has on our bodies, and the products that you use, even skincare, and really looking into that. I will never give up my retinol. That's like my, don't take it away. But I think, things like understanding the risk factors for breast cancer, what increases your risk. So just be proactive, really advocate for yourself with your doctor. If your doctor's like, no, it's too early, you don't have to worry about that, but it is on your heart, find another doctor and keep going until you find somebody who's going to listen to you. I know the creator behind that account was saying that right now it's like 1 in 8 women are being diagnosed with breast cancer, and doctors are expecting that to increase to 1 in 6 in the next few years. So be vigilant and take care of yourself, advocate for yourself. And yeah, that was on my heart to share.
I'm so glad because this is close to my heart as well. I had probably in the past 2 years, there have been at least 6 women in my circle that were diagnosed. And before that, I started working with a local organization, Carolina Breast Friends, and was part of Dancing with the Stars Charlotte in 2019. And I got heavily involved, started to really understand, because you see it all the time, like the pink ribbon and all of that, but to really understand like how many women are affected, and men too.
Yes.
And that it's really important to be your own advocate for your health. Like, I can't agree with you more on that, because you have to stand up for yourself. The doctors, and it's not that the doctors are wrong or that, they're just not going to advocate for you. If you feel like something's wrong, if you feel like something's wrong, listen to your intuition, talk to the doctor, explain what's going on. If you're still not feeling heard, then yes, go to another doctor. And it's okay to do that. It's okay, because you are the one speaking for yourself. So thank you so much for opening up. I feel like we've covered so much. There's going to be breaking up this content. It's going to be easy. We're talking about this, we're talking about that. But I am just so honored and thrilled that you took the time today to sit down and have this conversation, and how involved you are in what I'm doing. And because when I came to you, I'm like, all right, so this is what I got. Here's my ugly baby. This is what I have. I've been doing it myself, jerry rigging it. I taught myself how to record. I taught myself all these things. And when she came back to me, because I have to say this, you gave me a compliment and I about lost it. And she was like, Cel, your interviews are actually really good. And I was like, really? I was like, because it's one thing for, because not everybody tells you if they've heard it or they've listened to it. You don't know by nobody's really posting reviews. So I don't really know how to gauge it. Yeah. But for you as a producer who works with many podcasters, this is what you do for a living. And when you give me that compliment, that was such a okay, I'm ready for the next level. I feel good. I'm ready to go. So thank you so much.
Yes, of course. That's my favorite thing is to take what the podcast that you've put together with duct tape and bubble gum, and then
that's what it is.
Kind of take it apart, and then we build it back like a refurbished hutch from Facebook Marketplace.
Yes.
It all comes together.
Yes. So stay tuned for seeing these new episodes come out on the YouTube channel and all of that. But I'm telling you right now, you need to get in touch with Kristen if you are thinking about a podcast, or you're like me that started and you just need to go next level. Kristen, tell them where they can reach you.
Sure. So my website is novicestudiosclt.com. You can find me over on Instagram at novicestudiosclt, or on LinkedIn at my personal LinkedIn, Kristen Stegall. And I think that's all the places. You can DM me. I'll share my email with Cel to put in the show notes for you as well if you just want to shoot me an email. But those are the fastest ways to reach me.
And get in touch with me. It's Cel Smart on Instagram. You can also send me an email at itscel@gmail.com. And lastly, I want to thank Novel University Place for allowing us to record in this gorgeous space.
Yes.
So again, thank you again for joining us, and stay tuned for more. And go back and check out Be Amazing podcast episodes. You can go to Spotify, you can go to iTunes, or you can go to Sweat.net. Thank you so much for listening to the Be Amazing podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please send it to someone who inspires you so they can feel amazing too. If you want to help us reach new listeners, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget, you can find the video versions of our episodes on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at the Be Amazing Podcast or DM me at Cel Smart. I'll see you in the next episode.